now call Deputy Finian McGrath.
Lascan Corda, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this new piece of legislation, the Gender Recognition Bill. Can I say as well that I warmly welcome the debate, and despite some flaws in the legislation, I will be strongly supporting it, as it is a historic step to a more equal and inclusive society. For me, it's also a major civil rights issue, as I want to live in a country that respects and celebrates diversity. In the last election, Lascan Corla, many people, when we knocked on the doors, people demanded change and reform. Now I see this legislation as part of the change and the reform agenda. This is now very much part of that agenda, and I welcome that. And I would urge all deputies to support the legislation. This week I had the honour of meeting Simon and Broden, both a parent and activist, on this particular piece of legislation. And I would like to quote from a letter that I received from Simon following our meeting, which really sums up the whole issue. And I quote from Simon: "This is indeed an opportunity for you and your colleagues to do just that. Make members of the trans community's lives a whole lot easier by passing a law that validates them and gives them rights. This is not just about a piece of paper, it's about human rights. The right of a small minority of citizens to be themselves." And I emphasise the word "to be themselves." Not because a medic says so, not because Lydia Foy won a historic case in the European Court, but because every person, and every child especially, has the right to be respected, valued and protected by their state. And I think that sums up what's going on in this legislation today. That to me sums up, and it's also a message to all of us that we need to act, and we need to act particularly soon in relation to children and their rights. I was interested to hear Deputy John Lyon's comments in relation to his reaction to some of our colleagues, and he seems to be kind of beating up on people that are supporting the legislation because they didn't come to the table sooner. But can I say that equality does not belong to any particular party. Equality is about the citizens of this state, and equality and respect for difference is a very important part of any democratic, inclusive society. I think it's very, very important that we recognise that in this legislation and in this debate. Ireland is the only country that does not provide for the possibility of legal gender recognition of transgender and intersex people in the European Union. Transgender refers to a person whose gender identity or gender expression differs from the sex assigned to them at birth. Intersex refers to a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that does not fit typical definitions of female or male. So these are the definitions. Legal gender recognition provides a process for an individual to change the gender marker on their birth cert and to be legally recognised by the state in their true gender. Birth certs are foundational identity documents and are often requested for official purposes. For example, social welfare, PPS numbers, getting a job or getting married. In certain cases, a person may be recognised as one gender on certain documents and another gender on their birth cert. This puts the individual at risk of being outed when they apply for a job, a new passport or entry into education. It can also lead to a denial of services and restrict the individual's ability to travel domestically and internationally. Forced outing may result in harassment, discrimination and even violence. And that is the world for many of transgender people. The lack of state recognition of trans and intersex identities is a major contributing factor to the marginalisation of these communities and is an urgent health and human rights issue. And that's where I'm coming from. We've got to ensure that it's a human rights and equality issue as well. I also think it's important that when we're supporting the legislation, and I'm strongly supporting this bill, because, as I emphasise, because it's an inclusive, progressive piece of legislation. But it is also proper for members of the opposition to point out flaws in the bill. And in relation to this, the bill retains the blanket exclusion preventing children under the age of 16 from obtaining legal recognition. This represents a failure on the part of the state to acknowledge both the existence of trans and intersex young people and the extremely high levels of prejudice that they may encounter because of their gender. For children, large aspects of their education, sports and activities are gendered. Therefore, it is important that trans and intersex young people are able to participate fully in school life and activities. And we have to lead on this particular issue, and we have to deal with this issue, particularly in relation to schools, youth clubs and all other youth groups as well. And I think it's important that we identify this, because education will play a very, very important part, as it was seen on other equality issues over the last number of years. So finally, Lascan Corla, I just want to say as well that I strongly support the HSE's model for self-determination. And this was strongly moved by Dr. Philip Crowley, the HSE National Director of Quality and Patient Safety, when he spoke before the Oireachtas Committee on Health, when he said the HSE endorses a gender recognition process which places the responsibility for self-declaration on the applicant rather than the details of the medical certificate diagnosis. I strongly support that position, and I think it's important that we say this in the debate. So finally, can I say, Lascan Corla, I welcome this bill because it's a historic bill. I welcome it and I totally support it. It's about children, it's about people, but above all, it's about creating a more caring and inclusive society in Ireland in 2015. Thank you, Lascan.